Hi everyone, this is Edith, and I am here today with my June wrap-up for the books that I read in June 2020, and this is the first ever book related video that I'm putting up in my channel, which is kind of crazy because I haven't made any videos in such a long time that it kind of doesn't even, like, I don't think I even really have people that are watching this, but hopefully some people will come back and they'll like the reading content. If you don't like the reading type of content, then I do have a couple of videos that are craft related coming up. The reason that I kind of stopped doing my craft videos was that I had a lot of back issues, and I still do, and sitting in my craft room and getting things done in my craft room was just really difficult for me, really painful. And so unfortunately and really sadly, I mean, it hurts me to even say it, I don't craft as much as I used to, just because my body can't, like, even though I want to, I can't. One thing that I always did love was reading, and I still love it, and crafting kind of took its place for a while. Like, my free time, obviously you have a certain amount of free time in your life, and so then my free time was dedicated a lot to my crafting instead of reading. And so I ended up not reading as much, and then now that I can't craft as much, I'll craft a little and then I will read a lot more, and if I have time, which most of the time I don't. And so this summer I actually read a lot, and so that's why I was able to do a June wrap-up video, because otherwise there would be like one book in there. So I did read a lot more because I had a lot more time. And another thing, just mentioning it because I kind of was talking about crafting and reading at the same time, but one of my most one of the things that I love doing the most is sitting in my craft room or standing in my craft room, whatever, and listening to an audiobook through my Alexa little device that's in here, which is disconnected right now, so she didn't panic or anything. But just kind of listening to an audiobook while I'm working is really, really relaxing and kind of kills two birds with one stone. So some of these books that I will be talking about today, I actually listen to them in audiobook format, and the other ones, like, for the first time in a long time, I was able to sit down, open up a book and read it and just get into it and enjoy it without being stressed out about getting things ready for work the next day or doing anything. I'm gonna go ahead and get started. The first book on my list, I'm cheating, it's not even a June book, it's a May book, but I read it at the end of May, and the reason that I am including it in this June wrap-up is because it is a book for my book club, which is not really a book club because it's just my sister and I tried to start a book club, but it just didn't work out. And then with with COVID and everything, it's not like we can meet anyway. And so it's been going on for over a year now, but we haven't really, I've been putting books out, but not really talking about them or anything, so it's not like we've really met. So it's just like a book suggestion group that I have. I'll link it below. It's on Instagram. And anyway, June, I read this book in May, but then I decided that that should be the book in June, and crazy because of everything that happened. Like, I read it at the end of May, but like maybe the last week. So before anything with the Black Lives Matter movement started, I had already read this book. And so, like, as soon as I kind of finished the book, stuff started to happen. And it's crazy the timing of that, because I had already chosen the book. Actually, let me check, because I'm now confused. I think it might have been May's book for our group, and then I don't know what June was then, because let me see. Oh, it was May's book, so it doesn't even belong in this list, but I'm still gonna mention it just because so actually I read it in May. I read it in May, but it was May's book, so never mind. But since I already mentioned and I already talked about it, I'm just gonna mention it here. It's Small Great Things. And so this book right here, I have my iPad. Everything's falling off of my craft bench, but anyway, it's about a woman who is a nurse in for newborns, and she gets accused of of murder because one of her patients dies, which is really sad. You know, it's a little baby, so it's extremely sad. So there are a lot of warnings for this book, but she gets accused of murder by the father, who is a neo-Nazi person and extremely racist. Didn't want her to even be around the baby person. And it just kind of takes you through the journey of like what she has to suffer or go through in order to come out of this. And the I won't say anything else other than that, because even this much, like sometimes I just like going into books blindly, and so even this much, I think this wasn't covered in the back. But other than that, I'm not going to give any more information. But it is from multiple perspectives, which is kind of nice and extremely difficult at the same time, because you get to hear the neo-Nazi perspective in here and all the hatred that comes with that. And it's just really unsettling to listen to, but it's just an extremely, I think, important conversation to have even through reading. And so yeah, I would recommend that you read it. It's really good. This is my first time making these videos, and I am not an organizer. I am not someone who plans ahead, so I don't even know if I'll have like to be read books or anything. But because of that, I don't make a lot of sense sometimes. But yeah, especially with the climate how it is right now, it's a really important book to read. Small Great Things by Jodi Picoult. I'm probably saying that wrong. Anyway, just really, really important book to read. And so that was our May book in my book club. So I'm gonna go in order, have my Goodreads up. And so the next book that I have, the challenge for June. So the challenge for June was that we go into, so in my book club I have a book, and then usually I have a monthly challenge, just something that it's more of a prompt, like something to get you reading, but usually it's like something fun. So I remember one time it was like, go to your bookcase and just like blindly poke around until you and then stop at a book. And my daughter ended up singing, and I was going like this and with my eyes closed, and then when she stopped, I stopped, and that's the book that I read. This month in June we had a read a book from your teens or preteen years, and then kind of look at it and see if your perspective on it changed at all. So the book that I read was Angus Thongs and Full Frontal Snogging. Right? I don't remember this cover. The cover that I read was like the one that's on Goodreads, but it's The Confessions of Georgia Nicholson. It's from that series. It's the first book, and I ended up reading this, and I mean, we were laughing. My daughter and I were laughing out loud because I was reading it out loud to her, because I need to practice reading out loud, just because I'm really, really bad. But anyway, we ended up reading this kind of together, not really, but I would read it out loud to her, and it was just extremely funny. But just my perspective on it completely changed from when I was like a preteen, obviously, because I thought the romance in it, I thought it was so cool back then, and I thought, oh my god, she's so lucky, blah blah blah. But and I really identified a lot more with her when I was younger because of all the angst and just like the parent hating in here. I don't know, as an older person, she seems ridiculous to me, honestly. The character is not as lovable when you're older, but when you're this age and you can relate to it a bunch, I get it why I liked it. When I was younger, I was always the rebel in my family, and I always felt like I didn't fit in as much as maybe the other people in my family did with each other, and so I always felt like I was an outsider, even though it's stupid because I know I wasn't. But I always felt that way. And so this book really, when I was younger, I know why I connected with it so much, but now as an older person, I'm just like, yeah, it's kind of embarrassing that I had some of these similar thoughts as Georgia. But I mean, overall, it's funny. It's a good book to read, especially if you're that age group. It's fun. But it was nice. It was nice to go back and to have this challenge where I got to read something that I hadn't read in like years and years, and I completely forgot about it, and I was able to go back and kind of get to see myself as a young person again. And it's crazy. I mean, It was really nice. It was a nice challenge. So Angus thongs and full frontal snogging. I don't know if I should rate these. I don't even know how much I rated this on here on Goodreads. Oh, I put 3 out of 5, but I think that changed because as an adult. But it's still funny. I mean, it's more like 3.5 to 4. Probably should have had these in order, but the next book that I read was Harry Potter y las Reliquias de la Muerte. It is the 7th book in the Harry Potter series, but I read it in Spanish. I've been trying really hard to read more in Spanish because I mean, I never had to. I grew up in the United States. Obviously, we spoke Spanish at home and everything, but I don't have the academic Spanish as much as I'd like to have the academic Spanish. I have it because I took some classes in college, but I don't have as much as I wish I did, and because of that I really don't have experience with reading books in Spanish. And so I don't know if you guys, like I said, Audible is really important to me because I do both listen and read to things. And this is one of the books where I did some of it listening and some of it reading because otherwise I couldn't get through it in Spanish. It's just, I'm not there yet. I'm really trying. But if you guys didn't know, Audible has 1 through 7 now on their website in Spanish, and the person who narrates them is Carlos Ponce, which is really nice to see him outside of like novelas and music. Anyway, he narrates all 7 books, and so Harry Potter y las Reliquias de la Muerte was really fun. I started it as an audiobook, but I've had this book in my shelf for a long time because I always wanted to read them in Spanish. And so I ended up like a third of the way in just reading it in Spanish. And like my husband thought it was so funny because I couldn't pronounce things. Like just, I think it's when you're reading, I mean, even in English, like you come to books and your brain automatically recognizes them. So it makes it a lot easier. But when you're reading in a completely different language that you've never read in before, even if you understand the concept of reading in that language and you know how to read in that language, it's a lot harder because your brain doesn't recognize anything yet. So it was just challenging for me. But obviously I've read I've reread Harry Potter so many times. I've listened to the audiobooks so many times. Jim Dale is amazing. I'm sorry, Carlos Ponce, but I don't think you can compare to that. That's so mean. But Jim Dale is amazing, and Carlos Ponce was really good at, like, if I was rating the audiobooks, the narration of the audiobooks, Jim Dale would be like a 5, more than a 5. I think it's just amazing. And then Carlos Ponce would be a 4 for me. I mean, he did a really good job, but I don't think that he had the range that Jim Dale had. Either way, Harry Potter is just like my all-time favorite series and really important to my life. So it was nice to be able to experience both the audiobook and the book in Spanish. Okay, so that was my third book, kind of. Okay, the next book that I read, the next book that I read was "And the Band Played On" by Randy Schultz. Yeah, by Randy Schultz. It is a book about the AIDS pandemic or epidemic, I should say, and just kind of how it was allowed to be spread and how it wasn't noticed it was noticed, but it wasn't given the importance that it deserved and that it really needed to have in order to be able to stop it, because people didn't care about the people who it was happening to. So this book kind of goes through how it began, how the AIDS epidemic began, and how because the people who were being affected were homosexual mostly, obviously not only, but the majority of them were. It was, a lot of people saw it like, oh, this is your punishment for what it is, for what you are, basically. And they didn't give it any importance, and then they could have stopped it before it got big. They could have stopped it, and they could have made such a big impact, and it wouldn't have killed as many people as it has throughout the years. And this is a journalist who kind of went through the story of how it started, and just, it's a nonfiction obviously, and how it was allowed to spread, and how people kind of just turned their heads to it because they didn't they didn't care. And that's like the whole thing of this. And me telling you what it's about, it's not spoiling it. It's nonfiction. It's just a really good read. I read this in college, and I think this is my third time reading this. But because June was Pride Month, or is Pride Month, we're still in June. I just really wanted to reread this. This story makes me cry every single time that I read it. Even thinking right now about it, I want to cry. It's just really it's a difficult thing that happened. I hate that our society is like that. And I mean, if anything, us living right now through COVID times should really explain how people in politics don't care, and people who have the ability to change things, they don't, because it's not convenient for them, and it's not important to them, and it's not affecting them, right? In June 2020, this I think we can all relate to. And the fact that it's Pride Month, and the fact that we have the Black Lives Matter movement going on right now, a lot of the themes are very similar. And if you like nonfiction, read it. If you like listening to audiobooks, the audiobook is really good. The first time that I experienced this book, it was through audiobook, because I was in college and I didn't have time to like read everything. I was a history major, obviously I had a lot to read, and so I listened to this book the first time that I listened to it, and I remember like having to stop it and just like cry. But it's just a really good book. So it's And the Band Played On by Randy Schultz. So recommend it, highly recommend it. That is a 5 out of 5 book for me. Okay. The next book was our June book. So this actually was our June book. It's by Ann Patchett, and I honestly did not like this book. I went into YouTube and I tried looking for people's opinions, because I originally, like, coming out of this book, I really had to push myself to read it, finish it first of all, and then coming out of it, I was like, did people actually like this book? So I went onto YouTube, and a lot of people did like it. Honestly, I think you have to know yourself when you're reading, and one of the things that I enjoy is having plot. It doesn't have to be there, but if it's not there, and if it's more of a character study, then the characters really have to be interesting for me to get into it, or just, I don't know, the writing, something has to be really, really good for me to bring me in if it doesn't have a plot, and just this didn't have it. The characters that are in the Dutch house, I like the main character, who's the brother, that is, the perspective is from, it's his perspective, and they were likable enough is what I'm saying, but they just weren't they weren't special to me. And so I just felt like I wasted my time reading this book. I gave it between a 2.5 and a 3 star. I didn't feel connected with it. I really had to push myself to finish it. It was interesting as I was reading it, especially at the beginning. It was kind of interesting, but towards the end, I just had to push myself to finish reading the book, and I kind of regret buying it. I wish I hadn't, because it's money I could have spent on another book, and like I said, I didn't like it. So I ended up, the book itself is beautiful, and I think that's what, called me to it. And it goes back to don't judge a book by its cover. I loved the book cover itself, but I don't know, I just didn't feel connected with it. I felt like I was wasting my time as I was reading it. It started off really good, and then I just didn't feel like it took the path that I was expecting, or that, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, when a book takes a path that you're not expecting, it can be a really amazing thing, but it was just boring. Some of the stuff, I don't know, it was okay, which is why I gave it a 2.5/3 rating. It was an okay book. It wasn't something that I would ever recommend to anyone reading just because I didn't like it. If you're a character study type of person, then you might love this book. I did see people on YouTube who were like, oh, I love this book, it was so good, this is why I love Ann Patchett. This is the first thing that I've ever read by her, and I don't even know if I want to read other stuff. I probably will, just because I know a lot of people like her, but her writing, it was an okay book. That's all I can say about it. It was okay, and I don't know, I didn't feel like I spent my time wisely on that one, just because I kind of feel bad that it was our June book and that I chose it. Okay, so the next book, in contrast, was a freaking amazing book. Okay, so I do cuss a lot in this channel. Hopefully I won't cuss as much because I'm trying not to do that. As for my profession in general, I just don't do that, and so I tend to change up the words now. Kind of like when you have a baby or a little kid and you try to not cuss because they're around. It's kind of become that thing for me, but not always. So anyway, the next book that I read was The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. It is a story about a young girl named Piccola, and she basically, the title kind of tells you, but she wants blue eyes, and you kind of read through it and you understand why she wants the blue eyes. And it's just an incredibly sad story. It is told from multiple perspectives. It is not just the story, it is not only featuring Piccola the whole time. It like tells you multiple stories of the people around her in her life, but it's just incredibly sad. The reason that I picked this up was because John Green mentioned it in one of his videos with Hank, you know, when they go back and forth, and he mentioned like it completely destroyed him, and it completely destroyed me. It's just so sad. And I love the way that the themes that are explored in this book, the way that they are explored. I love that because it's subtle. It's not like it's coming out directly and telling you what you need to get from this book, but obviously you'll get it at the end. And it does deal with, you know, with race in the United States, even though it's not ever directly like, well, it is somewhat directly said, but it's not like, that's not the emphasis of the book, I should say. But it is extremely important to read, I think, and it's just so sad. And as someone who is not white, you know, well, not, I am Mexican and I have like, you know, I'm mixed. Basically, that's what Mexicans are. We are both native blood and Spanish blood mixed together. But someone who does not have that white privilege and who grew up always feeling like an outsider in this country, to some extent feeling like an outsider, and realizing that all of the things in the mainstream media and everything going on, pop culture, everything was never about me. It was never about my experience. It was always like I was looking into somebody else's life and trying to fit into that life. And never seeing myself represented. This is one of those books that you will definitely identify with. I mean, it is just extremely heartbreaking, but it is a good book. And I gave it a 4.5. So on my Goodreads it says 4, but it's a 4.5 for me. So the next book, The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse, is a book that I saw recommended by one of the channels on YouTube. And like blindly picked it up because they told I forget her name, but anyway, she said just pick it up, and I agree with it. Just pick it up. It's a good book. You can't really talk about what it is about because it's kind of one of those books that is more like life lesson-y. Like it has like all these beautiful quotes that you could use to teach young people especially. So I would recommend this for young people especially, but also adults. It's really, it has good messages. Reading through it, I am very cynical, so sometimes I was like, you know, but either way, it is a good message, and I want to pick up another copy to keep in my classroom, or either to gut out. I know that sounds awful, but like to cut through and frame some of this, because the illustrations are beautiful and the way that they have the writing in there is beautiful, and everything in here is pretty quotable. So I think it's just a good life lesson to have, like a life lesson type of book, or like lessons, or like just life. I don't know how to explain it, but it's just a really good book for younger people to read so that they understand that, I don't even want to say understand, so they just kind of read through it and get to see positive things, I guess. Okay, I did give that, I think, maybe a 3, no, a 4, but it was kind of like a 3.5 for me, but it is because I am a cynic. Okay, so the next book that I read, oh, I picked it up, but I don't have that book actually. Dear Girls by Ali Wong. My daughter and I both love Ali Wong's specials on Netflix. We watch them all the time. We think they're hilarious. They're a little bit awkward for us because she's 16 and I'm her mom. So she knows what she's talking about enough so that it's awkward for her to be around me sometimes when we're watching it. But we have a really good relationship and we're really close, so it's okay. But sometimes we're like, oh my god. But Ali Wong is friggin' hilarious, and so I did pick up the audio book for that because I wanted to hear her tell her story, and it is narrated by Ali Wong, and you can definitely tell because the way that she's, you know, she speaks, I mean, it's really funny. It's funny to listen to. The whole idea behind Dear Girls is that it is letters that she wrote to her children for when they grow up, because she said that when her dad passed away, she realized she didn't know a lot about him, especially in the younger years. She didn't know a lot about what had happened to him or how he was shaped into the person that he was shaped into. And so she wanted to leave something behind for her girls to get to know her. And hopefully she'd have, you know, all the time in the world to have these conversations with them. But in case she didn't, or just, you know, to put it out there. And then each of the chapters is kind of like advice through what happened through Ali. So through her life experience, giving them advice. And so it's pretty funny. It's good. I didn't love it just because some of the stuff that Ali like said, I don't think that I agree 100% with her worldview based. Okay, so my camera died. I think it died when I was talking about Ali Wong, and so I'm gonna continue from there, from where I thought it died, but we'll see. So anyway, Dear Girls again is about Ali sending these letters or writing these letters for her girls with advice. Again, I listened to it because I wanted to hear it told through Ali Wong, who is hilarious. And the reason that I only gave it, I think I gave it 4 stars, but it was more like a 3.5 for me, was because some of the things that Ali mentioned, like, I thought she was kind of condescending to some of the characters in her life, and a little bitchy to some. And I know part of it is just her way, because she's a comedian, just her way of like her comedic relief type of things. But some of the parts I didn't agree with too much, but I did like it overall, and I do agree with him overall. So I did give it a 4, but it was more of a 3.5. And I really enjoyed the part at the end where her husband's talking about his journey through this, like his, sorry, let me move this around. So his role in Ali's and their family's life, and kind of like how that is viewed even today in society, how a dad who stays home with the kids is viewed, and how, you know, he was okay with it because of things that happened in his life, or just his experience growing up, and he wanted to be that constant for their children. And I thought that was great that they included that, just because it's important to hear. I hate when people look down, you know, on men or women for staying home and taking care of the kids, or see it as not a job. I mean, that's an important job, if any other job there is that is that important, just because you're being there for kids that are gonna grow up and be part of this world. And hopefully by you being there, you know, you're making sure that they become good humans. So but yeah, I really enjoyed that they had his perspective at the end. I loved that part, just because I didn't expect it. Again, I didn't pick up the book. I picked up the audio book, and so I had no clue like what was in the actual book. I didn't flip through it or anything, but it was really good. So again, 3.5, almost 4 stars for that. The next book that I read is because the camera died, so it threw me off, is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. And this book I really recommend to anyone. I hadn't read it. This is the first time I read it. I related so much with so many parts of this just because I have been through depression a few times. There was a point, I think in 2016 was like the worst year ever for me. It was a really difficult year because of like my back and other issues that I had. And just not being able to do things because my body wouldn't respond. It was really difficult, and I was depressed. I didn't know it at the time, but I was completely depressed. I remember just kind of being so happy when people came around to my house because I couldn't go anywhere. Because of my situation, I wasn't able to really walk around and stuff, and so whenever people came to visit me, I would be so happy. But I was so depressed, and I was completely able to relate to some of the stuff in here. My favorite quote is the fig tree quote. So if you've read this, you know what I'm talking about. I feel like it relates so much to my life because I I know that it's gonna sound so narcissistic when I say this, but every time that I've kind of tried to do something, it's not too difficult for me. Like, I don't struggle so much. Like, even at school, I did struggle with reading because it was my second language, and because it's one of the things that I have struggled with in my life. But like in school, if I actually wanted to do something and actually put effort into something, I would usually be able to pick it up quickly. And so I didn't really struggle through things. So I mean, I passed a lot of my classes doing the bare minimum because I could get really good test scores and things like that. And I think that hurt me overall because I just never really got to know who I was. And I saw all of these opportunities in front of me, and I just didn't know what to choose because I didn't know me, right? I didn't know what I liked because I think sometimes not being able to do certain things, it narrows down the list for you, and you're able to understand yourself a little bit better. But when you don't have something that narrows down that list, then it makes it a lot harder for you to realize who you are. So it was really difficult for me. And so when that fig tree quote came up in the book, I was like, oh my God, that's me. That's 100% me. So this is how I felt a lot of my life. So if you haven't read it, read it. The Bell Jar is about Esther Greenwood, who is, like it says in the back, brilliant, beautiful, enormously talented and successful, but slowly going under. And it kind of goes through Esther's breakdown and takes you into her mind of, you know, how it is that she goes through this experience. I don't want to say too much just because I think that you should read it and find out. I don't know. I'm one of those people who likes to go blindly into books. So I don't like to say a lot on here, but it is a really good modern classic. It is, for me, very relatable in some points, not all of it, but it's just a really good book, and I would very much recommend it. I gave it a 4.5 stars. Okay. And let's see. Okay, and the last book that I read, that I completed in June of 2020 was Sense and Sensibility. I did mention that I read a lot of Jane Austen growing up, but really it was just rereading Pride and Prejudice the whole time. So I actually haven't read too many of her novels. I read Pride and Prejudice. I read parts of Emma, but I stopped because I didn't really like Emma. But now I want to go back and read it again. I read Persuasion a couple of times, and I started I don't know which other one of her novels I started, but I really hadn't read as much Jane Austen as I thought I had. I just kept on reading the same ones because I like them so much. So I finally read Sense and Sensibility. I have multiple copies of Jane Austen, by the way, just because I don't know, every time I go to like a thrift store or something and I find one, I think they're so pretty and I pick them up. This one was one of the ones that I didn't think was so pretty. It has the cover of the movie on there, and so I didn't like that too much. But and then the back also has parts of the movie in it. The flap does give you a little thing on it, but I've had this book for a long time and I hadn't read it. And when I was about to read it, I like to take the dust jackets off because they get in my way. So I take them out and I leave them in the bookcase, and then I just read them this way. And I freaking fell in love with this cover. It is a beautiful green, and it has gold foiling on the spine, and then on this side it has like my favorite yellow, and then the ribbon is green. It's just a really pretty copy, and then that made me curious, so I went into my Persuasion one because I think I read that one on my Kindle both of the times that I read it, but I have a hard copy. And so I went into the Persuasion one, and it's the same way, and I was like, what? This whole time I really like this. It's really pretty. So I ended up taking it off and reading it this way, which was great. I've been practicing reading aloud because I'm really horrible at it, and so this whole time I was reading this book, I was reading it out loud, and like it just made me laugh so much. If you haven't read Sense and Sensibility, I recommend it. It's a good book. I might go and do like a review of a book that has spoilers, and if you have read it, just because I do want to talk about it. Like Marianne, I feel like I identify more with her character than Eleanor, but I hate Marianne. Like, she is so selfish and only thinks, well, obviously selfish is only thinking of yourself, but like she has no she doesn't think about others ever. She only cares about her own happiness and her own, what she thinks is right. Like, so arrogant in thinking that only her way is the important, most whatever way. I don't know. I just didn't like her. I didn't like Marianne at all. I remember when I watched the movie, and that was one of the reasons that I didn't want to read the book for a long time, was because I don't like watching the movies first. I like not knowing what's gonna happen, and so when I watch the movie, knowing what's gonna happen really kind of kills it sometimes for me. But I hadn't watched the movie in so long, and I've been meaning to I wanted to watch the movie again, and I was like, no, I'm gonna read the book first, so that at least it's been a long time since I watched the movie. So I read the book. I knew what was gonna happen because of the movie, but I was able to read it just because it had been so long. And anyway, if you haven't read it, Sense and Sensibility is good. It will make you laugh. It made me laugh, at least, and I thought it was a good book, so I gave this one a 4 out of 5. Anyway, that's all for my June wrap up. If you have any questions about the books, let me know. If you have any recommendations based off of these books, especially the ones that I liked, let me know, because I love when people go like, well, if you like this book, you probably will like this book. And again, the reason that I am doing this is just because nobody in my family cares. They care a little bit, but I probably get them so tired of talking about books all the time. So I decided to just talk to myself in the camera, and then hopefully you guys will watch it. Anyway, this is Edith, Crafting Felicity, and thank you so much if you stayed till the end. I will be coming out with some crafting videos soon, so if you are usually here for that, don't worry. I do plan on putting those out. Thank you, and have a good day. Bye.